don't know if you guys can all see our fortune cookie down below, but I added a fortune cookie. It says, sometimes we're busy and we just got to take a break. So tonight's going to be one of those nights. That's wise words. That's fortune cookie words from Janelle and I. We'll get a quick show in, make it short and quick. As you can see, Janelle is joining us from an airport. She has literally just run through security. So congratulations for making through TSA to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, today was actually a very smooth, surprisingly smooth transition through security. It was not so smooth getting through Los Angeles traffic to get to the airport. And as much as I was enjoying like the palm trees and the beautiful California sunshine, as soon as you get on the freeway, you remember why you don't live here.
I was going to say, and you're a native Californian. You're from California, so you have lived that life. But the stress and the feeling and the tension that comes with it, that's got to be miserable.
Yeah, all the above. Like that's definitely, every time I get off a plane here, I always feel like, oh, like I miss it. I love this place. This is just like, it feels homey to me. And then as soon as you turn on the freeway or, like then you're reminded why I don't live in this Southern California area. I mean, it doesn't even matter what time of day. I think when I landed the other night at midnight, we still fought traffic. So it's just part of the culture here.
Yeah. And now you're heading home. So you got your California fix and now you can head home.
I am. I'm grateful for that. So yeah, no, and I'm just happy to be here.
Good. We're glad to have you. And I know you've got to get on. You're going to board here in about 20 minutes. So we are really squeezing the sucker in. But we wanted to take a chance or take an opportunity to talk about friendships. Friendships can be found or cultivated in really competitive environments. And so I thought, that would be a really fun topic we could just kind of reflect on. At this stage of our life, we're sort of past a lot of the competitive environments. And so it's kind of a neat thing to look back and realize, oh, yeah, that was a really tough part. So, okay. So why did you suggest this topic to discuss this week?
Well, I think it's a common concern for people of really all ages. As you're competing for things, how do you find like partnerships and friendships? And then how do you continue to cultivate those relationships as maybe the dynamics change? And what if like you get something and a friend doesn't get something? Like, how can you navigate that? And I think that it's just helpful for us to kind of reflect on our experiences, maybe even on like the meaning of friendship. I think we've done a really great job of kind of both like excelling in our spaces and then maintaining like the ability to have somewhat like a non-judgmental space, right? Which I think was really important. I know it was for me, for us to kind of vent. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but to actually just share about our experiences and make us feel less alone.
Yes. I think that idea of sharing with somebody, right? Like there's a element of vulnerability that makes people nervous. And I think our younger selves would have been much more concerned about showing a vulnerability because I think one of the biggest concerns at the young age, and again, I work with a lot of cadets, undergraduate level, and then I have teenage daughters, and they definitely struggle with this idea, because a lot of their performance informs their position, their social position and whatnot. So I do think younger, you are still figuring out who you are. And so you use a lot of your accomplishments or, your position to determine what your identity is. And then later in life, you start to realize who you actually are. But for me, I would say that's mid to late 30s that I finally was I'm not gonna do that. When did you start to feel kind of settled in that sense?
I think I've kind of ebbed and flowed with it over the years. I think there's been moments in my life where I felt pretty content as to the position I was in and the relationships I was building. And then I think, even today I probably still might even have moments where I reflect on the relationships in my life and where they're at. I've had a newfound success in my post-military career. And that has been challenging and some of my friendships haven't lasted through some of that transition.
Yeah. Do you think they don't last because the person is jealous? Do you think they don't last because you sort of diverge in your interests? Like, what is it that you think cause a lot of those, loss of friendships?
You know, I have always been a big believer in relationships, are cultivated with two parties, right? Like you each have to kind of make an make a effort to kind of keep the relationship going. Although the other side of that is that a good relationship always understands, right, that there are going to be lulls because people get busy, and that doesn't mean that we're not friends. If we, like that kind of a situation. Um, but I do also think that there has to be some give and take along the length of that friendship and an understanding. And I think that part of it is, losing interest in the same types of things, being in different phases of your life, I think definitely has
Yeah.
something to do with it. And, I've even talked to, my daughter Allie about this too. Like, your real friends are going to be there applauding your success, and they're also going to be there to help support you if you're failing and you're making mistakes. And those friends that tend to disappear in both those extremes are probably the ones that are either just so focused in their own lives they don't have space for anyone else, which is okay, or they're just not meant to be there next to you in that phase. That's kind of how I look at it, to better understand like my relationships and how.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think too, I would love to say like, yeah, I was always there to celebrate my friend's success. But there was like, I think early on for me, this sense of like zero sum game. So if somebody succeeded, that, you know what I mean? That felt like, well, I didn't succeed. And for me, one of the things that helped in that sort of recontextualizing that was to say, one, it's not a zero sum game, right? And I think a lot of the literature would point to this to say, hey, in like, think about sports, rivalries, right? In some cases, those are people that are similar competing. And a lot of times they are friends and yet they push each other, right? So I'm on the healthy side here of rivalry. So let me just start with that. But also like in that case, what you realize is, well, actually, if my friend or my, partner or whatever succeeds, then that actually I can use that to help push me to see either what's possible or to kind of encourage me and push towards a new goal or something like that. You know what I mean? So in some ways I used to, instead of being jealous, I used to always say like, that's a pace setter. Like in running, the pace setter is the person you're just trying to keep up with so you can continue on. And so for me, I think like particularly you have served as a good pace setter for me. Like as we've gone, you go, oh, okay, I see what she's doing. That's a good pace to be at. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's how I reframed it. And again, that's probably like late 20s, early 30s, I would think, where I could kind of say, hey, you don't have to feel competitive with somebody. What you can use is that person to kind of help you, challenge you and push and whatnot.
I love that sentiment, being a pace setter. I think that's great. You, I will admit, okay, I'm gonna open up some vulnerability. I don't know if you recall when we were all in Alabama, but you and Rob and Chris had all made like two below, two lieutenant colonel. And it was hard for me, right? Like it was hard to be like the one that didn't.
Yes.
There was definitely, it doesn't hurt any less when you're proud of the people who did accomplish it. It doesn't hurt any less the fact that like you didn't get the thing that you wanted, right? Or you, um, didn't achieve some goal that you had set out for yourself, and then you see those people close to you like accomplishing it. It still hurts. But I think the way that I've been able to kind of reframe it, I like the pace setter idea. I wish I kind of had that back then. But I kind of, took it in this, and this is my intrinsic motivation, right? To kind of just say that wasn't for me, but there's something else is, right? Like there's
Yeah.
a redirect. And that's kind of how I've always framed failure in my life. Not that like not getting promoted is a failure, but like it is something like, like a missed goal or a missed opportunity in your career, your life. And so I've always like used those as data points to offer me information on how I can pivot or reframe the next thing I go after. And that's been really helpful for me. So then I don't focus on what I didn't get and what someone else got, but that was their journey and there's a different one for me.
Yes. And that idea of like, hey, new opportunities. And that's where the best successes actually come from, right? So you gave Bryn that advice. My daughter, when she recently had kind of a setback in her, in some of the things that she does. And I think she really took that to heart. I thought it was great advice because she said, okay, I'll pivot and something good will come of this. And since that, she's joined the cross country team and she's getting to run, and found a passion that she didn't even know she had. So anyway, I do think there's something to like reframing that. We say that all the time, like you actually just reframe it. Same thing happened, but you reframe it into a motivational or a positive spin that can help with your confidence, that can help you sort of reset that feeling of, hey, I didn't get this. I'm competitive with another person. I want to ask you, do you think that we also were competitive because we were women in a very male dominated, and so we were sort of tokens? Like competitiveness among tokens or people of certain, gender or minorities tend to run into that problem where they feel like the only people they're competing against is the other tokens in the room. So women compete against women or whatever, while you should actually be building each other up because actually you will succeed more as a group.
So it's interesting you bring that up. I'm here in Los Angeles because I spoke at Fox Sports today. And after I did like the greater keynote event, I actually did a breakout session with the women of Fox Sports, which very similar, right? Male dominated industry, very few women that are in the organization, especially in the executive level. And we had this exact conversation around, right? How do you thrive and how do you lift others? Because it is almost as if, at least in my experience, that the culture creates this environment where when you're a token or you're one of, there's a uniqueness and specialness that gets assigned to you, right or wrong, right? Like there's like, I am the only woman at the table, like I feel special. And the second another woman sits down next to you or is very close to sitting at the table with you, a lot of people in their minds will equate that to, oh my gosh, some of my specialness is going to go away if I invite this other woman to sit next to me. Then it's going to diminish me. And in fact, the way that I've always thought of it is that, well, but if I have her at the table next to me, there's more than one voice that sounds like mine. There's more than one voice to redirect conversations or to bring different perspectives. But that has not always been the case. And when I've been the woman trying to fight for a seat at the table, other women have not welcomed me. So I think it's a very real phenomena. And I think it's part of what these male dominated cultures, like how they kind of sit with this idea of like one or two women, right, that are kind of those token spaces. So it's our job, I think, as the women that are sitting at the tables to change that dynamic and to shift the language we use when we invite other people inside the circle.
Yeah. And all the diversity studies or the inclusion studies point to the same result, whether it's in private industry or public. We've done lots in the military. They all show the same thing. When you pull in those additional groups, you actually strengthen trust in an organization and you improve the diversity of thought because these people come just naturally. They have different lived experience. NYU Business School had this study that I was looking at earlier, and it talks about the rivalry formula. And it was basically saying, again, back to the rival idea, but it really does hold true that when you increase the number of strong voices in a conversation, everybody improves. It's like the biblical, saying iron sharpens iron. And it's just funny that we fall victim to losing our specialness when what you really want is to strengthen your specialness and make it wholly acceptable. And yet we act out of fear so often. I don't think there was any senior women that particularly reached out to me as I came up, right? Like that just was not common. And so, yeah, you're right. I think it's time to change that cycle.
Yeah. I have a question for you. How do you see the young women, that you work with in your circles, especially at the academy? how do you see that dynamic changing? Or, because I mean, even when we were at the academy, I was one of in many of my classes. How is that different today than it was for us
Yeah.
back
I don't know. So we're what were we like around 10 to 12%, I think, female when we were there. And now we're like just at 30%. And so, that's a significant increase. And yet I don't know that it's enough to overcome that specialness. It's like maybe a little less special, but still special. I don't see the same competitiveness around the women, though you'd have to ask them their like real experience, because I would say I don't see it. But what I still see is the lack of strong female voices being heard. Like that for sure I still see, right? And I think if there was more banding together, you know what I mean, you would come stronger. I remember when I was in grad school, we were reading this study. It was when we were at Harvard, and it was talking about how certain communities actually in private industry, particularly, they grow their own, right? The Asian American community is very good at growing, pulling up people. And then it pointed to the fact that women are very bad at doing that. So I think we're better, but I think there's probably a pretty long way to go.
I know it was hard for me many times to find the right role models and mentors along the way for modeling the behaviors. And so I really felt for a long time like we were just figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
As we went along through our careers, like how do you excel as a female? How do you carry other females with you? How do you mentor and develop women to replace you in a non-threatening way? Because I always felt like a lot of the women that were above me were just threatened by my position, and so I had to like find my own mentors and fight my own way to get that seat at the table.
No, I know. That relationship up and down, I think that one is, we talked about that a little bit in the competitive environments show. In this case, like, laterally, you're looking for your friends. I would wonder, like, what are some things that you would say help contribute to like establishing those friendships? So I'll say the first one is find people that you do have something in common with, and then be willing to share and be open and honest and vulnerable about your experiences, right? And so for, certain women, that might just be talking about families. But I think you have to like balance the risk of them using the information against you also. So I think that's a tough one. Maybe start small and then build trust over time.
Actually, that's so true. That is actually, I hate even thinking, but saying that they could use it against you, it is so true. And so building up the trust is so important before you really dive into those relationships. I think some of it was for me, history, like people that I've known and trusted for years. I relied on them. I know you and I remained close like through our entire career. And even though we were doing different things and in different spaces and, having different challenges, I always felt like there was an open door and an opportunity to like reach out and call and just say, hey, how do I navigate through this space? Right. I've never been through this. I don't have anyone here that I can really lean on. To have that kind of friendly relationship with, because it is hard to find people that are like you, especially like dual military and then wanting to have kids. And then every time you add like another, and now I'm a commander, right? Like the pool of people that can be your peers like shrinks
Yeah.
smaller and smaller.
And that's what's sad as you move up. Small. It's a small group, right? It's lonely as you go up the chain. I think one thing we touched on was like the jealousy and how to handle the jealousy. I think there's another one over there too, which is the trust. Like I can think, sometimes if I'll send a text or an email, if I'm sending it to you and you don't respond right away, I don't be like, oh my God, she's probably so mad that I said that. Or like, I know, like, no, she knows that I didn't mean it that way. I know, I would always come from a place of, what I mean? Like goodness, even if I maybe say something strongly worded or something like that. And I know if you say something to me, I'm going to read it from the best possible way, because I know that would never mean anything. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's time and trust and all those kind of things. That's a tough one to build.
Yeah, I still remember distinctly one time when Allie and we went to Paris, and one of her friends had sent her, we were sleeping, right? Because it was like nighttime in Paris, daytime in the States. And I think her friend sent like 300 text messages that were like, Ellie, where are you? Why aren't you answering? What's going on, Ellie? Are you mad at me? Like, what? And I just was like, oh my goodness, this is what happens with like our digital devices these days.
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't respond right away, and then you automatically assume the worst, right? They're mad at me. It was something I said yesterday. And then how much time is wasted? And I know we had a whole episode on mindfulness, but how much time is wasted thinking through the value of our friendship in those moments versus just like trusting the relationship and saying, hey, maybe their phone's off, maybe they're out of town, maybe something's going on in their life.
Yeah. I think that's so true. I think that is like one of the nicest things is I know if I send you something, like you'll get to it. It might be a little bit of time. It might be right away, but regardless, it'll be there. That kind of trust. I think that just takes time and, you know what I mean? Repeated opportunities to show up as the best friend that you could possibly be. Well, I think you have to get to a flight here. I think you're boarding.
I do.
So I know we can't take questions tonight because you need to get on. But just real quick, in closing, anything else you want to mention about, you know, this tough thing, which is having friends in competitive environments?
The one thing that I'll say to close is to remember that most of the time, like when it's jealousy, when it's like both, you know, individuals striving for similar end goals, and one doesn't get it, the other one does. Always remember, I think, like the core of your friendship, right? It's if you're the one that's succeeding, remember that if your friend is upset or whatever, like it's not about, you know, we can take it personally, right? But a lot of times it's just in their own journey of like struggling through like their failure and their pivot, right? Give them space, give them a moment. And then if you're on the other side, remember that if I'm a real friend, I'm going to applaud you, right?
Yes.
I can kind of sit with this like, oh, wow, like I'm jealous. And that's a normal emotion to have. It's just, do you let it then drive your behaviors, or do you just sit with the emotion, let it pass, and then applaud your friend? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we really need to focus on. And I try to teach my daughter that, like, you know, I mean, here's the other thing. You get a win, your friend gets a win. Your friend gets a win, you get a win. Like, that's really how it ends up in life, that I've at least seen. And if we if we keep this focus on this count or this competitive nature between friends, there's enough other people to compete against in this world. We should just, right? Like, why would we create an extra person to have this like jealousy and like, you know, negative emotion associated with, right? There's like, it's life's too short.
So true. Yeah, there's enough going on. Wouldn't you like to have a safe space that you could just go to and let that part go? I mean, amen, 100%.
Awesome.
Well, okay, we're going to wrap it up. That was a great way to kind of wrap up the show, and just remember that when you have a friend, it is worth taking the time and energy to invest in it, and it is worth making sure you always come at it from a trusting relationship, and let that person maybe, you know, be a little bit of a healthy rival. Let them be a pace setter if you need to. Just don't make them your, you know, your frenemy. That's just weird and I think unhealthy in the long run. So I love the idea of when your friend wins, you win, right? Just sort of by association. And we talked about that with our spouses. Like when my spouse is doing really well, I kind of get a bump too. So I'm seen with successful people, I must be successful. So okay. Well, listen, any other questions? And we had a couple emails this past week. We'll get to those next week. We are creatinglift98@gmail.com. So please send any questions or comments. Otherwise, we will see you here next week. Oh, and also Creating Lift on YouTube too. So we'll post the show here shortly. We'll see you guys next week, same time. Janelle, have a safe trip home, and everybody have a good night.